thank you everybody for joining. Jenny, if you could share the slides, we can get started. But in a nutshell, this is the second of two public meetings in support of the corridor study and vision plan for the Blanchard Wheeler corridor. We're nearing the end of our scope of work. We really enjoyed the project. It's been great. I think the best part it has been how constructive and enthusiastic and participatory uh, you folks have been. I think at the first public meeting we had such a great turnout, and everybody was so positive and forthcoming with ideas. And really, clearly, everybody cares a lot about this corridor and what the existing conditions are there now and what could be done to improve upon it. I think, as we all would agree, that everything is changing so quickly these days in terms of the way that people occupy space. And so a lot of cities and towns across the state are doing some soul searching for the different districts that they have in their urban fabric. And okay, where do we go from here? And I think this is a classic example of that, where you have a lot of office space. People are using office space differently. So you have that, which is, a little, some vacant or buildings that aren't fully occupied. And then in terms of the roadway itself, it was built once upon a time for automobile traffic, and nowadays there's a much greater emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle movement. So how can we factor that in? And there's so many elements within that, of course, in terms of safety and placemaking and comfort, um, and economic development, and et cetera. So really, we've been painting with broad strokes, looking at all these different overlapping layers, and it's been a great project so far. Like I said, this is the second of the two public meetings. We'll give a recap of the first public meeting in a bit. But essentially, the purpose of that meeting was to hear from you all about what's the conditions on the ground now, and then what's needed. So we took that, and through our discussions with you all and with people and town staff, um, you know, we were able to construct a vision statement and then a set of goals. We're going to present those to you tonight. And what we look forward to at the during the second half of the meeting will be, as Matt said, we're going to have breakout discussions. So please, if you could listen carefully during the presentation, it won't be too long. But really, what we've done is synthesized what we heard from you, and what we want to do. We've packaged it and put it, and we'll present it to you tonight. So if you could listen carefully, maybe take some notes on any finer points. During that breakout room at the end, everybody's going to get a chance to say who they are, and then what they thought about the draft vision statement and the draft goals. And you can talk about all of them, or you can talk about specific things that matter to you the most. So thank you in advance for any feedback that you can give us towards the end. So before we jump into the slides, one question that came up that we would love it if folks have an answer to this, we'd appreciate it if you could pop it into the chat window here in Teams. And the question is, how is it that you heard about tonight's meeting? The town publicized it through various outlets, including the planning department's social media, Burlington Buzz, BCAT News, town clerk email, town calendar, potentially some other ways. So if you could just take a second and maybe pop into the chat window where you found out about it, helps the town to ensure that their outreach methods are working. So thank you for that. Jenny, if you could advance the slide. So here's the structure for tonight's meeting. Introductions, we'll introduce ourselves for those who might not have been here on the first meeting or who might need a refresher, as it was some time ago. We can talk about our findings from the first public meeting. Julia can present those. After that, Julia can present the draft vision statement that we came up with based on the discussions from the first meeting. Then I'll walk through the goals that we've defined. Basically, what we wanted to do there is we took the vision statement, which is a relatively generic statement, and made it more concrete and broke it down into goals and objectives. So we're going to walk through each of those with you and look forward to hearing your responses. Following that, we'll have the group discussion and we'll talk about our next steps to close out our process, and then we can adjourn. So thanks, Jenny, if you could advance it. So introductions, rather than going around the table, I'll just give a quick summary. The consulting team is ourselves, VHB. I'm Luke Mitchell, Senior Urban Planner and Designer. Frank DiPietro is a Senior Engineer on the project, a Burlington native from back in the day, and who's been a great resource in terms of providing the context for us. And then Julia and Mintz and Jennifer Nelson from VHB have also played critical roles on the project. So that's us. On the next slide. And then again, for those who might be new to the project, if so, thank you for joining. We're happy to have you. Here, let me just do a quick refresher in terms of the purpose of the work we've been doing. So the town of Burlington is preparing a vision plan for the Blanchard Wheeler Road corridor to achieve the following goals and objectives. One, articulate a growth strategy for the future with attention to planning, engineering, and redevelopment considerations. And then two, utilize the plan to attract investment, promote economic development along the corridor, and three, improve streetscapes with safer roadways that include multimodal options. So again, this is what you might call a cross-disciplinary or transdisciplinary effort, where we're really looking at overlapping layers of considerations and trying to hit on all of them, which I think you'll hear reflected in both the vision statement and the goals. All right, if you can move forward to the next one, Jenny. Okay, and then here is our study area. Y'all are probably familiar with it, but it's basically the length of both Blanchard and Wheeler, the Wheeler Road, that corridor, which really encompasses so many interesting businesses as well as residences and natural features, including the Mary Cummings Park, the Northeastern Innovation Campus. So really, it's a great example of a mixed use corridor. So that's our study area. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Julia Mintz, and she can present basically the findings from the first public meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Like Luke's already mentioned, we held our first public meeting back in February, the first of two for the project. And this meeting was centered on what the baseline issues and opportunities are within the corridor, and then shaping the vision statement for the plan, which we'll present in just a couple of minutes. But from the breakout group discussions from the first public meeting, as well as some live polling that we did, just going to summarize what we heard from the community in terms of the strengths and possible weaknesses within the corridor. So in terms of the corridor's strengths, that includes its natural resources. We heard a lot of responses noting the green space and open space within the corridor, wetlands, wooded areas, and vernal ponds. And the public realm was of note as well, including Mary Cummings Park, and then the economic vitality of the corridor. And Jenny, if you want to advance to the next slide. In terms of some of the weaknesses that were noted by participants, a lot having centering on the roadways within the corridor. So narrow roadway sections, a lack of shoulders or poor lighting, safety issues for pedestrians or for cyclists, and flooding and icing that can occur within the corridor. We heard issues about connectivity throughout the study area, and yeah, poor walkability and bikeability. And if you want to go to the next slide. So based on these issues and opportunities and some additional feedback that we discussed during public meeting 1, we created a vision statement for the corridor, which I'll read out. The corridor along Blanchard and Wheeler Road has seen significant development over the past 25 years. The corridor will continue to be an excellent place to live and a vital mixed-use hub for research, technology, and recreation. Offering employment and a rich natural environment, the corridor will continue to foster economic growth, accessibility, and improved connectivity with safe streetscapes and multimodal pathways. Through community dialogue, residents and stakeholders within the corridor have reflected and explored a vision for the future. So the corridor will be connected. The corridor will provide pathways connecting its employees, residents, and visitors to destinations within the corridor and surrounding districts. Through creative placemaking, the corridor will reflect the character of its population, history, and natural environments. Future planning initiatives will involve relevant local and regional stakeholders, including residents, business owners, and institutional leaders. The corridor will be multimodal, so the corridor will serve a range of modal options, supporting complete streets that accommodate all roadway users, including motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Roadway improvements and enhanced walkability will provide a safe and enjoyable environment for pedestrians and cyclists. The corridor will be sustainable. Future development along the corridor will be sensitive to environmental impact and support public health and wellness. The corridor will enhance critical natural resources that aid with flood management and contribute to recreational opportunities, including wetlands and open space. The corridor will be resilient. The corridor will be adaptable to changing economic and regional trends by incorporating new innovative approaches to infrastructure, land use, and open space planning. The corridor will be balanced. The corridor will balance new development with the preservation of natural resources, as well as establish a mix of uses that support a vibrant district. It will offer a wide variety of amenities that support all its users and expand the public realm. And then lastly, the corridor will be vibrant. The corridor will be a hub for employment and economic activity, supporting services and thriving businesses, both large and small. So like Luke mentioned earlier, we'd love to hear some of your feedback on the vision statement and whether we've captured the major opportunities, potentially issues within the corridor, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss that in just a bit. So for now, I'll turn it back to Luke.
Thanks, Julia. Jenny, if you could flip the slide. So, okay, just fair warning, a lot of language on the next 6 slides. And we appreciate your attention. It's a lot to go through. It'd be somewhat like drinking from water from a fire hose. But I think it's worth it to go through it. And like I said before, if you can take notes, anything that jumps out at you, please do, so that you can bring it up during the breakout discussions, which we'll be taking notes on everything that you say. So these goals, if you'll notice, relate directly to the vision statement, which basically articulated each of these. So, and going around from the top clockwise, it's to enhance connectivity. Second, establish multimodal transportation. Third, expand the public realm. Fourth, preserve existing wetlands. Fifth, foster economic growth and resilience. And sixth, maintain a dialogue with the stakeholders. So really, you know, we got a ton of feedback from you guys during the first meeting, as well as from the town staff. And these are the 6 categories that each one of them seem to fall into. So we did our best to sort of lump them into these 6 categories for the purposes of our final documentation being, you know, more navigable and easy to accessible as a plan. So basically, what I'll walk through right now is we have actions that are associated with each of these goals. Ultimately, when we finish our process, what we plan to do is for each of the actions I'm about to walk through, we're going to assign a rough order of magnitude cost to each one of those, identify a responsible party to carry the action out, and then basically assign a timing to each one, whether it's short-term, medium-term, long-term, essentially so that you'll have a roadmap for achieving each of these goals over time. So if you could go to the next slide, Jenny. Thank you. So goal 1 is enhancing connectivity within the corridor and with surrounding districts by establishing pathways to destinations. The first is to design and implement or multimodal pathways from Muller Road to Middlesex Highway. So as many of you likely know, there's a plan to go from Muller Road east, which is already had been designed to a large extent, which is a sidewalk along the road, which is great. It's going to create a much better pedestrian activity for that half of the corridor. So for the western half of the corridor, still hasn't been designed yet. So I think that's a great goal there, is to design and implement some form of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure so that you have a continuous ped bike infrastructure all the way from one end of the corridor to the other. Second is to determine a preferred regional bus connection plan and advocate for that plan with the MBTA. We understand that there is, to a limited degree, bus connectivity now. But I know that there's been a lot of dialogue in town about how that could potentially be improved. So the goal there is to figure out as a community what's the preferred plan, and then telegraph that to the MBTA, who I think will be willing to listen if you have a common voice behind that one. Third, create a connected bicycle lane network of off-street and on-street pathways. You have a bicycle infrastructure existing now. It doesn't always connect. So one step that we can do as part of our process is to draw that map about where the missed connections are and what needs to be done. The next one actually can be incorporated into that one. It's identify a solution for bicyclists. This is a very specific one. Identify a solution for bicyclists needing to cross Blanchard Road safely between Muller Road and Van de Graaff bike path. So that's, there's an existing bike path on Van de Graaff and then an existing one on Muller Road. And there's just a gap that's basically Blanchard Road is connecting the two frayed ends of that bike network now. So if there could be a connection made for bicyclists, that's really going to basically connect two lines to make a longer bike path. So next, this is an important one. Perform and it relatively accomplishable, which is perform deferred maintenance on the existing off-street bike paths located in Seven Springs. You already have the infrastructure, but they haven't been maintained as well as they could be. So, gather resources, come up with a plan to get that deferred maintenance taken care of, and really open up those pathways. Next, diversify and improve dining and retail options for people who work and live in the corridor. This really resonates more with a future goal, and we might end up removing it from this list and moving it back there. Might be a bit redundant, but although it does relate in some ways. But that's something that we already earmarked for ourselves earlier today. Last one is to improve pedestrian and bike connectivity between the Northeastern Innovation Campus and the Van de Graaff Commercial District. We see those two sort of general sub-districts as having so much programmatically in common that we think it's worth noting here that, okay, let's think about how we can expand connections on the ground between those two places, which could help support and encourage more programmatic connections between the two of them. Thanks. Jenny, if you go to the next one. So the second goal is to establish multimodal transportation throughout the corridor with a focus on safety. So first is to address blind spots throughout the corridor, especially at curving points in the road, prioritizing roadway space for bicyclists. I think we heard a lot about safety coming out of that first public meeting, which resonated with us, having been out on the corridor and looking at existing conditions. The blind spots, there's a few significant blind spots where cars are driving at fast speeds, which I think is beyond a perceived sense of danger and closer towards a real actual sense of danger. So that's an important one. Second, determine locations where the road shoulders could be widened. In many locations, you have either narrow or non-existent shoulders, and that's something that we heard from a few folks. We know that we believe that there is legal right of way that where that work could be done. So identify where that can be done, apply for grant funding, get that to happen more safe for everybody. Third is to look at traffic or transportation demand management requirements that are placed on businesses in the corridor. And that's a whole consideration in and of itself. But that's, if you're not familiar with that sort of program, that's basically creating incentives for businesses to encourage their employees and or residents to, for example, ride a bicycle to work or take public transit, etc. Next is design and implement traffic calming measures throughout the length of the corridor, which could include share rows, signalized crossings, perhaps at that one moment that I spoke about at Blanchard, right in the middle there, near Muller Road. Bump outs along the corridor to slow cars down. One that we haven't mentioned here, but that we should add is signage about sharing the road. You know, that it can a relatively inexpensive intervention that can really make a difference. Next is to conduct an updated traffic analysis of Blanchard Wheeler in light of post-pandemic activity. As I mentioned earlier, and as everybody knows, the pandemic changed everything about how people are using space in cities and towns. So realistically, how much are people driving up and down Blanchard Wheeler in light of today's traffic use? I think it's an important data point and something that could inform a lot of the other stuff that you'll be doing. And again, very actionable and something that can be accomplished in the short term. Next is to study current parking activity. This is also similar to the last one. People are going into the office less than they used to. You know, that's the biggest change. So if you could, again, very actionable, perform a study, go out there, do some traffic counts at different times throughout the week and the weekend, at night, day, afternoon, morning, and find out how utilized each of these parking facilities really is. I think that the information you learn from that process could really suggest opportunities for future use of that space, if in fact they are underutilized, which anecdotally, based on our observations and based on a lot of what we heard from you all, a lot of those spaces are underutilized. Perform a complete streets analysis of the corridor to determine where bike and pedestrian infrastructure could be added. Again, this is similar to a lot of the previous recommendations, but it's something very actionable that we could assign a specific cost to, and you could include it in the plan. So we can go to the next slide, Jenny. Thank you. Goal 3 is to expand the public realm. So the idea there is that by enhancing and improving access to existing open space and establishing new publicly accessible spaces, you can enhance the vibrancy of the corridor, which would have great impacts for everybody, including, in a transactional sense, increasing property values throughout the district, especially in light of what we were just speaking about. The underutilized surface parking areas, a lot of that could be converted to publicly used spaces that could support different types of active and passive recreation activities, programming, and placemaking. So first, build out an inventory of existing recreational paths and determine possibility of improvements. Second, identify existing bicycle parking and docking charging equipment corridor wide and make plans for improvements. Again, to support, facilitate, encourage bicycling activity. People will be much more likely to ride a bike and not drive a car if there's infrastructure in place that signals to them that it's something that the town is encouraging. Third, create placemaking measures throughout the corridor that could help to brand the district. There's specific ways that you could do that. So if you could, do a sort of small plan for that, you could identify what those are. Fourth, create pocket parks and public gathering spaces throughout the corridor that incorporate landscaping and amenities This is less an engineering or technical thing. This is more work with designers and creatives to come up with great ideas about how to use the public space in a way that's not being done now. All right, so next goal, and again, thank you all for your patience. I know there's a lot going on in these slides. Goal 4 is to preserve the existing wetlands in balance with future development. You got a lot of wetlands going on in the corridor, which has a lot of implications. It constrains development, and we certainly want to have our plan ensure that any future development would support the wetlands. So first is to improve drainage at points throughout the corridor that experience frequent flooding and icing in winter months. This is something that came directly out of the dialogue that we had with you previously. Second is to protect the existing wetlands as a natural resource and a tool in flood management. Third is to incentivize best management practices for stormwater management on private residential properties. So there's only so much that the town can control, but working with private property owners, then the stormwater management system can really be improved. Fourth, restore wetlands in developed areas where possible. Fifth, convert underutilized hardscapes, for example, surface parking, to natural or previous surfaces that could expand groundwater infiltration and to help with the floodplain issue. Lastly, prioritize groundwater recharge where possible, which ties to the previous. Okay, goal 5 is to foster economic growth and resilience along the corridor while maintaining a mix of uses and preserving the scale and character of the corridor. This is one where we heard a lot from different people, and sometimes not, I wouldn't say it was mutually exclusive, but different things that we heard sort of went in different directions. So we tried our best to capture things that people could really agree on here. And look forward to hearing your response if there's anything we need to add to this or maybe modify a little bit. So first, conduct a review of the zoning bylaws to determine whether regulations support a variety of infill development projects. The idea here is, look, you have most of the developable or all of the developable parcels are already developed, right? So yes, some of those may be redeveloped, but in lieu of that, what could be done is perhaps smaller infill development to complement what's the existing properties that are already there. So it's looking at the zoning bylaws, and then also could incentives be added that incentivize infill development. And by the way, by infill development, we mean smaller uses, cafes, restaurants, bars, galleries, outdoor spaces, things that would again enhance the quality of life for people who live and work in the corridor. Second, retrofit existing developments in response to changing work trends, including a higher percentage of employees working from home. So what does that mean? Well, potentially for office spaces that aren't 100% full or utilized. I think the suggestion here is let's take a good hard look at that. What does that mean for those vacant spaces? How else could they potentially be used other than offices that could support a more mixed use, vibrant use of the corridor? Third is to explore alternative uses of office space and parking lots in light of hybrid work model, so similar to the last one. Next, explore the feasibility of incorporating complementary land uses such as cafes, restaurants, retail, etc. Next is to repurpose underutilized parking to create new public space amenities, infill development, etc. And then if you could go to the last one, Jenny. Page goal 6 is, this is an important one. The idea here is that we don't want this plan to be the culmination of a process or the end of a process. Really, we're trying to have it establish the beginning of the process, wherein you have a vision statement, you have a set of goals, you have an implementation matrix, you have a good understanding of what needs to be done. So how do you all as a community carry that forward? So maintain a dialogue with stakeholders throughout the corridor, including residents, business owners, and institutional leaders to determine priorities and needs for future planning. First is to build partnerships among residents, businesses, landowners, institutions, and the town for the long-term mutual benefit associated with shared interests. Second is to coordinate and synchronize ongoing and future planning efforts to avoid redundancy or conflict. And I think the message there is, look, the way things work typically is you have a bunch of property owners that are all located nearby and adjacent to one another. And each one of them is making their own decisions, and that's great, and that's the way it should be. But enhancing the coordination between those sort of major property owners is really going to help to ensure that a lot of these goals materialize. And then third, establish semi-annual meetings. This is our suggestion to establish semi-annual meetings about community building efforts and business development in the corridor. And really, that our thinking on that one comes out of the fact that we saw such an enthusiastic participation from you all in the first public meeting that it occurred to us, let's not let this just sort of slip away after this. Let's keep it going. So thanks again for listening to all of that. I know it was a mouthful. If you could go to the next slide, Jenny, I'm trying to think. I think that the next step is so we're going to break out into breakout rooms. I think that we're going to divide the group into 3 groups. Frank is going to lead one discussion, Julia is going to lead another group, and Liz is going to lead the third group. And then for each one of those groups, we'll have note takers, namely Caleb, Jenny, and myself, and we'll do our best to capture everything you say. So the questions to be discussed in the breakout sessions are quite generic, but what are your reactions to everything we just presented in terms of the draft vision and goals? We welcome your candor in all of this. You know, did we hit the right mark or did we miss it? Please let us know. This is the sort of, in terms of our process, this is our last touch point with the community. So we very much want to hear your honest reactions to everything that we've come up with here. And we're not done. We still have to, you know, we're planning to modify and adjust and upgrade what we just presented to you based on what we hear from you tonight. So, and then again, connected to that, what are we missing? Is there anything that has been discussed or that you've had on your mind that simply wasn't reflected here? So thank you all again in advance, and we'll all regroup in 25 minutes or so. Thank you. Okay. Are we all back? Looks like it. Okay, thank you all so much. Wow, Frank and I had a great session. A lot of great ideas and responses, and a lot to distill and address. Just thank you all. Hopefully you guys, or yeah, Julia, Liz, how did it go?
So I was with Caleb, and our group was fantastic. We had a lot of great discussions, and we had some really great insights and things that I think, you know, we need to do a little more focus on, and I will regroup on that. But we had a great discussion, and I think one thing that we heard from the group was that we need to kind of integrate the residents in there more so that the goals of the integrate, you know, residents as well, because we can't forget about everybody at Seven Springs, and there's also a lot of people down Muller Road that live in the area. So don't forget the residents, I think was kind of a big message that I got from my group.
We heard, by the way, we heard the same, and also don't forget placing the emphasis on Mary Cummings Park. That, you know, I think we mentioned it, but maybe emphasize it a little more, as it's such a critical resource. It's that maybe emphasizing it that a little more. And Julia, how about your group?
We also had a great discussion. We had a lot of great questions that we took note of, and echoing, you know, taking residents and other corridor stakeholders into account, abutters in particular, and yeah, focus on continued collaboration and focusing on implementation, which I know we'll discuss a bit more in our next steps.
Thank you. So good segue. And I know, thank you all so much for the time you've given tonight. We won't keep you for much longer. I'll just walk through our next steps and then we can adjourn. So as I said, we're towards the end of our process, but we're not finished yet. Really our next step is to take my notes, Jenny's notes, Caleb's notes, bring them all together, and really go through them as a group, figure out what it is that we need to do to go back and adjust. We can do that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll focus on the roadmap. So these are just goals, right? So we'll map them out on a timeline. What comes first? Who's responsible for what? Focusing less on the wishy-washy goals, more on actionable items. This is a thing that can be done. This is how many dollars it'll cost, and with some thoughts on how you might access those dollars. Also, think something that came up on our breakout discussion was graphics. Can we use graphics to show a few of these ideas in a way that makes them more accessible? For example, if we just describe, connect the two pathways from Van de Graaff and Muller, a lot of people might not exactly have it in mind what that means. So we can use maps, some 3D graphics to illustrate some of those finer points in our final materials. And yeah, we'll crystallize all that into a document and hand it over to the town planner. So again, thank you guys so much. Liz and Kayla will be in touch on following up with you guys again soon, just to make sure that we keep this moving.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight and giving us your time. We will provide updates, and when we get a final plan, we'll make sure it's on our website, and we will be sure to share it with the group as well, to kind of talk about next steps and what we're going to do. So thank you so much, and have a great night, everybody.